Good afternoon and welcome to today's podcast. I'm joined today by David Gold, who's Head of Enterprise Performance Management, that's FP&A at Shell, and my co-founder Neil French from STOIX. Hello guys, how are you?
Hey, yeah, I'm well, and good afternoon.
Good, yeah, very good. Thanks. Good to be here.
Great. I think we'll just kick off with the opening gambit. We're going to be discussing broad topics around FP&A today. So let's just kick off with a broad scene setter. Why do you think FP&A exists, David? And therefore, I guess, why is it such an important area that we should all care about in finance?
Yeah, so I think you can actually give a very, very quick and short answer to this. I mean, FP&A is about business decision making. So it's about making sure that businesses are supported with finance data and beyond that to make the decisions that they need to. And that's why it's so important, because the essence of being a successful business is making successful decisions. And that some other areas of finance, which can be about compliance, regulatory requirements, filings, and so on. It's business decision making that in FP&A we're supporting people with.
Okay. And generally, what do you think good FP&A looks like?
Yeah, well, so this is maybe the $1 million question, and there's lots of different people with lots of different opinions on what is good FP&A. Software vendors will give you views, consultancies will give you views, and everybody will be happy to tell you how they can transform your FP&A processes. Industry bodies will have all kinds of different views on FP&A, and you hear lots of things like connected planning, zero-based budgeting, rolling forecast, scenario planning, driver-based forecasting. The list goes on, and that people talk about as being sort of good FP&A. But to me, it comes back to the point that I made at the start about, and when you asked me the question, why does FP&A exist? FP&A is about business decision making, and good FP&A is about making sure that you have the processes, the people, the systems in place to enable those decisions to take place. And it's it's not unlike other processes where, and if you take let's take a procurement process or a accounts payable process, there's very little dispute or debate about the fact that you need a three-way match when you're processing invoices, that you have to match different things together to pay the invoice. In FP&A, lots of people have lots of different views, and they can all be correct if the processes that are in place are enabling business decisions to be made in a cost-effective way. So I guess it's quite difficult to define what good FP&A is, or there's lots of different views and different things will be applicable in different situations. But I would say what you can, I think, look at to understand, whether or to think about what good FP&A is for any particular organization, I think there are some things you can look at, and they're as follows. And the first thing is to make sure that your FP&A sort of outputs and the professionals are there to help decisions be made when business leaders are making the decisions, so advising them in their decisions. So if the FP&A team aren't partners in that discussion, then you know that you're probably failing in terms of having good FP&A. I think if you ask business leaders, business executives, and they're clear, they understand and they appreciate the value of the FP&A function, so they're having meetings. The first person they call into the meeting are the FP&A professionals to help them make the decisions that need to be made, then that's also an indication that you've got good FP&A. So it really is about having everything in place to support the business executives. And I think lastly, another sort of factor of good FP&A, and it's a slightly different area, is about making sure that all of this is happening at a reasonable cost. So using the right technology, the right balance of centers of expertise and business service centers. So sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but I think that it is the $1 million question. I don't think there is one answer to that. And it really is about making sure that your good FP&A is FP&A that is focused on supporting the business in its decision making and doing it in a cost-effective way.
Yeah, because I was thinking you could have the best FP&A in the world, but if your leadership team isn't listening to the output of that analysis or insight, it's worth nothing. So I guess a massive part of it is gaining the trust and credibility of your leadership team that you're supporting.
Yeah, absolutely, and that comes a bit to the skills of sort of FP&A professionals. So on the one hand, you've got sort of the technical hard skills. So I guess, accounting, traditionally things like, spreadsheets, Excel, PowerPoint, and increasingly now things like Power BI and data science. So I guess coming into the skill set of FP&A, but there's also the skill around, business partnering. And I think very, very importantly, storytelling as well. Because with FP&A, often when you're delivering a message to an executive, it's about telling the story. It's about giving the context, why it's important to them, why they need to listen, what the implications of that are. And that's as well as the technical skills, you're quite right. You've got to have that place at the table and be able to, communicate all the good technical work you've done to executives.
And in terms of trends for FP&A, we've touched on quite a few areas already, but AI, big data, all the lovely buzzwords we want to talk about in today's world. But how important have those tools been for you personally in Shell, or just generally in your career? Because I know you're a bit of a geek like me in many ways. So is that something that you've kind of really felt as added value to the process?
Absolutely, in different ways. So and there's lots of different examples I could talk about where I've been involved in sort of technology and using data and data analytics and data science to solve things. And maybe let me pick a couple of examples. And I've led some projects where we've been using Anaplan, which is an FP&A planning tool. And I must say there are other tools on the market as well that offer similar functionality, but Anaplan is one of the market leaders, and we've been able to use that to replace sort of traditional Excel and PowerPoint copy paste processes that FP&A teams have often historically had in place to enable decision making. And in the past, people have struggled to put these Excel and PowerPoint processes into systems because, and I've also got some experience of this, you design the system, but by the time you've designed the system and implemented the system, the business decisions which are being made have changed, and the system that you put in place is no longer relevant for the decisions that are needed. So as a result, people go back to Excel and PowerPoint to solve them. And Anaplan is a wonderful tool, and we use that to replace some planning processes in some places, and it essentially brought everything out of the Excel and PowerPoint into Anaplan, but it still gives you the flexibility to be able to change things on the fly in a controlled way, and offers you all the advantages of sort of simultaneous working and driver-based modeling and other things that you can do in that environment. So that's one example of sort of using technology. And data science is an area where I've had a lot of passion. And actually, I must say I did actually a 6-month Harvard data science course the year before last. So it's an area which I've got quite a bit of passion for. But we replaced what were traditional sort of bottom-up forecasting processes with a data science top-down process for some of Shell's quarterly forecasting processes. And you might think, well, why is this such a big deal? But we actually were able to cut out hundreds of hours of work and replace it with the data science approach. And after all that, we found that the data science approach was actually more accurate than the bottom-up process. And there are lots of reasons for that, which is probably take longer to explain than we've got time to go into now. But just very quickly, one was timing, because traditional processes, forecasting processes, sort of start at the bottom and then data is gradually consolidated up through an organization. And each of those processes takes several days or sometimes longer. So by the time you look at the information at the top of the organization, it's already out of date. So again, using a data science approach, you can very quickly get a forecast as information changes. That's the first thing. And the second thing, and we haven't really touched on this yet in the conversation today, is that from a behaviors perspective, it also removes any of the human biases. Of course, it can introduce other biases because you can get biases in data science as well, but it removes the behaviors that people sometimes have to pad forecasts or to give forecasts that maybe aren't really the expected outcomes, but are what people's bosses want to see, or are trying to preserve budgets or things like that. And that's again it's a more complicated topic, but they also help to remove that. So that was also something I led and had a big impact. So yes, it's a fascinating area, and there's just so much opportunity in so many places to improve things with technology and more sort of data science type approaches.
Yeah. Does it allow you to, and I guess you kind of touched on it there, but I presume it allows you to kind of challenge back. So if you were a group FP&A function, you might be using Anaplan to kind of do the group piece, and then the regions might be using their standard forecasting approaches, which have a little bit more flexibility, and it allows group to perhaps challenge back a little bit to some of the more optimistic, shall we say, forecasts and things that might be out there.
Yeah. So it's a good, and actually this is a good example of where data science can be helpful with this. Is that I guess there's three, and if you look at the way, and this isn't just Shell, if you look at the way that sort of organizations use data science type approaches to replace forecasts, there's sort of three stages in the journey. And the first stage is that you still leave your existing processes in place, but you run a data science forecast as well. And you use, as you're describing, the data science type forecast to challenge the forecasts that come in from the regions or other parts of the business that you're receiving them from. So it gives you a really sort of a scientific, and of course it will be like any forecast, it's always going to be wrong. The question is just by how much, but it gives you a real useful point to challenge from. So that's the first stage. The second stage is using data science approaches as the base, and then adding on other things that you know about or adjustments that you want to make. So you sort of move away from the bottom-up approach, but you still allow some human interaction. And the third and final stage is that you don't have any human interaction at all. You literally run a sort of predictive data science type approach, and you just take that, and that is your forecast without any intervention. I must say, I actually wonder whether that third stage is somewhere you want to be, because I think, I think there's always something about a decision that's going to be made or something that's coming up that a machine wouldn't know. But that gives you some idea about how things can progress. But even at that very early stage, the first stage, when organizations start, you're absolutely right, Rory. It gives you that ability to challenge. Yeah.
And I guess as we do evolve into the future, you'll be able to plug in kind of broader economic modeling and things like that. The sorts of things you say at the moment we couldn't do, but actually, I guess in the future, you might link it out to other data sets that help formulate that and allow you to make better decisions based on the broader economy and other factors as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got, I guess, the ability to take more data into account. So you're quite right. More than, and I guess, finance, management accounting traditionally has been very focused on financial data, but the ability to bring in operational data, the ability to bring in industry data, market trends, and so on is a huge opportunity. And also to be able to process that very, very quickly is going to offer lots of opportunities. I think the biggest challenge in this area, and there's been quite a bit of research on this, and my own personal experience bears this out as well, is that it does take a lot of time to clean up the data. So in a typical project, again, and I think research shows this, and my experience also backs this up. You can spend 90 or 95% of your time cleaning up your data, and only actually 5% doing the analysis. And that, I think, is a challenge. Going forward, is how organisations can improve that and be able, as a result, to be more agile.
Yeah. And Neil, I'm going to bring you in from a talent perspective here. I guess I get the feeling that you from hiring staff perspective, you've got very different types of FP&A professionals in different types of organisations. So part of the challenge for hiring is probably about how do you identify the right type of FP&A person for the right type of organisation? I don't know if that's something that you would want to touch on.
Yeah, I think it is tricky. We speak to CFOs and finance directors across a range of industries and sizes of businesses, and FP&A is a different thing from one company to the next. Some of it is a more commercially focused finance function, and some of it is very much a purely reporting function. Some of it's very much just driving decision making. Some of it you could actually say is purely more financial or management reporting. So it can be really difficult to identify the right people in an organization, especially when the challenges that can come through. I mean, we had it the other day. Job spec comes through for head of FP&A, and also the date on the job spec is June 2017, and it's rolled out in 2021. And you have to scratch your head and say, is this the same job? Bearing in mind some of the stuff David's touched on in terms of the tools that are now available and what you can actually do and what you can actually produce in 2021. So yeah, it can be quite challenging, and yeah, it's obviously moving quite quickly as well, as David mentioned. So yeah, I think it's just up to us to really ask the right questions and make sure we're asking what does the business need to know, what skill sets are they in? Is it someone who is actually more of a business partner? Is it someone who has got more of a systems spin and has implemented things like Anaplan or Power BI or Tableau, all those good things that we're now talking about?
Yeah, I
was going to David a quick question actually off the back of that, and what I guess this is probably to direct at aspiring directors of FP&A who aren't maybe quite at your level yet, David, and but see themselves as maybe head of or director of FP&A in a large complex organisation. Are there any sort of tips that you would give to those wanting to get to that sort of level, say by 2025, as to what they should be doing to try and lead the way in FP&A?
Yeah, so I think to be a rounded FP&A professional and be a rounded senior FP&A leader, there's a range of different things that you need to have, and we were touching on them earlier. And also, to make it more complicated, it's changing the whole time, as you were just highlighting, Neil. And I think there's a mix of sort of traditional accounting type skills, the new sort of the new like data science, new technology type skills, which you could argue is sort of the same, but different. You've got business understanding as well, which is very important. And you talked about the different sort of types of FP&A, that all the different ways organizations maybe look at FP&A. But for a lot of them, it's important that you understand the industry that's there as well. And then finally, you've got, and I was referring to earlier, sort of the storytelling piece as well, the communication. We talk about, often people talk about sort of having an impact or interpersonal skills or things like that. In FP&A, I often think it comes to storytelling. And I think it's important to look at what you are, what your skills are, and think about, where is the area that I need to improve against those areas. And I think all of them have particular interventions that you can take to try and improve I guess what it is that you offer. And I think it's also important about finding really what you've got a passion to do, because that will that will usually get you a seat at the table, is my experience. If there's there's an area that really in FP&A that really takes your fancy and you want to go after, then you'll do that with passion and drive, and that will make you that'll give you the ability to make an impact.
Yeah, great.
Do you think we have a responsibility, David, to kind of, when we're talking to CFOs about their next FP&A hire, to sort of press them back on, I understand this is how you do it now, but where do you want to be, and therefore what type of person do you need for the future?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid challenge. Yeah, it's about making sure that you. I think it's a very good discussion to have around what actually is it, not what do you have now, but what is it that you want in the future. And in particular, if you've got an FP&A organization that's been traditionally more about just churning out management reporting, copy pasting I keep mentioning it, but copy pasting your Excel and your PowerPoint around, and all of us have done it, by the way. It's important, graduate training work, or at least it was when I was coming through. Hopefully that'll end at some point. But you really want to change the FP&A function into being something that can dynamically and very effectively support business decisions in an effective way. Then I think that's a very good sort of question and to ask and challenge to make. Yeah.
Good. And I guess we're talking about your role has been quite transformational. Anyway, if you were to kind of, and obviously you have kind of transformed quite a lot within Shell, how would you go about, if you were in a new company now and they wanted to transform their function into a class leading FP&A function, how would you go about that?
Yeah, well, so I think the first and the most important thing is to be clear about what the business decisions are that are being made at the moment, because it's a mistake, in my view, to start from sort of the system or the process end and then think about doing implementations and then wondering, what's actually the problem that we need to solve. What is it that the business, what are the decisions that the business needs to make, and how does FP&A need to be in place to support that? And I think once you have that and you're clear on that, you can then start to look at the processes, the systems, data science, the skills, and also increasingly, and we haven't touched much on this, but using centers of expertise or shared service centers to be able to do that in a cost-effective way. But it all starts from what is it that you're trying to achieve, and how can we as FP&A better support the business. And then after that, I guess once you've had that, I would say as well, FP&A, as we keep saying, it's very different from other finance processes. It's really a change management journey. So it involves a lot of engagements and building that case for change across the wider finance organization. Another mistake that you can make, I think, is to sort of treat FP&A as a separate function and have other bits of finance actually working with the business to support them with what they're doing, but then there's these FP&A guys somewhere else. It really is an activity you need to take the whole of finance with you, or improvement journey you need to take the whole of finance with you on.
Okay. Do you think strategy? Because obviously you see some companies just have these big strategy teams, and like you say, you almost touched on it, there might be a bit of a disconnect sometimes between what strategy are doing and what FP&A are doing, and that's why they should be so closely linked together, if not the same function.
Yeah. It's again, I think this comes from maybe some of the traditional ways that people have looked at FP&A or traditional sort of management reporting. There's been a group of people who've churned out management reports in finance, and there've been a separate group of people who've been talking about strategy. Really, a lot of it should be the same, or at least using the same data sets. If there's a strategy team, they should want to be working with the FP&A teams, and the FP&A team should be producing the right outputs or the right tools to enable the strategy teams to make to essentially do what they do and advise executives making decisions. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. David, I'm really conscious of our taking too much of your time today. So I think I think what we'll do is we'll put some links in the description as to how to connect with you on LinkedIn. And, I'd ask anyone that's enjoyed watching this to follow STOIX and our social profiles, particularly on LinkedIn, but also other channels. And thank you very much for your time, David. Thanks, Neil. And we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yeah, great. No, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you.